Hello there and welcome to Nimzo-Larsenist. We're going to do some practice games on chesskid.com. So we are going to be playing the Owen's defense as black. If white makes a move. Okay, I did not, it is a 400 rated player, so what can you expect? Let's bring the bishop back. Bring the knight out. Let's capture the queen. Bishop takes f4. Take the bishop. Almost lost my bishop. Bishop takes knight. Let's bring the bishop back. Bring a pawn into the action. Bring the queen in. And I believe this is checkmate. Good game. It's a little bit late right now, so I don't expect too many games available on ChessKid. Pawn b6, first 3 moves. Okay, sure. I'm just going to bring the knight out. Could have definitely brought out the bishop instead and unpinned myself, but I'm just thinking that I can chase the bishop away. Let's play bishop b4 anyways, since we are trying to remove the defender of the e4 square. Let's move the knight out to attack the pawn on c3. Either the pawn should move forward or the queen is going to go to d3. Regardless, I think I will be considering to play pawn to f5 and create the dragon, but just on the other side. Could also go into the pyramid setup, it's really your choice. Well, in this case, the pawn capture is amazing because we are also forking these two pieces at the same time. Let's castle the king to get our king into safety as quickly as possible. At this point, I am not 100% sure. Do we go for f4 or do we go for pyramid setup? Okay, let's go with pawn to f5. Sorry, I said f4 earlier, but... Okay, this move is a little bit useless. As you can see, it's not really attacking anything, so this kind of helps us play pawn to a6. If they play bishop to a4, we're just going to keep moving our pawns and then develop our knight. Okay, so in this position, and I've mentioned many times before, a lot of issues occur when knight or bishop come to this square. So what we're going to do first is we're going to play pawn to h6. This stops future. It also gives the king a little bit of an escape square in the future. But now what I want to do is just bring out the knight. We could bring out the knight to c6, however it blocks off the sniper bishop. In this situation, maybe capturing here and ruining the king's safety may have been a better move. I overlooked that, actually. And actually, instead of playing h6, maybe ruining the king's safety would be better. Okay, so the queen moves here, attacking the pawn on e6. Let us just move queen to e7 and defend the pawn. Okay, so rook goes here. What is the plan? There is some sort of pin going on here, however, can't exploit it for a few moves. So in this situation, what we can do is we can just simply win the bishop. So white is so fixed on this side, forgetting about the bishop on f4. Actually, that doesn't win the bishop. I just realized, because the... Oh no, I can make the bishop. I can win the bishop. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to capture this knight, so that the knight doesn't defend the square on h4. Push, and now the bishop is trapped. On to c3, let's take this bishop. So always be careful. This move looks very tempting. It looks like it's a free pawn, but in reality, you're placing your two rooks on the same diagonal. So you should always look at the whole entire board. So in this situation here, what we can simply do is, number one, can just push the pawn up. Now this pawn is going to be in danger. It blocks off the queen. Or just do a simple move of development. Let's do development. Now the two rooks are linked. Okay, this move, I have no idea what this move is about. I can honestly just play a pawn to a5. Now my pawns are all protected. Now my rook doesn't need to babysit a pawn on a6. So, seems like actually a pretty good move for us. Okay. So, how about we're going to play the pawn move to d5. And the reason for this move is because now we can capture the pawn on f3. If they play something like pawn to c4, we can play pawn c6 first, defend everything, and then capture the pawn on f3. Okay, so the queen moved here to attack the rook on f3. Let's just double up, protect the rook, and we have control over the half-open file. G4 could have also been a potential consideration. Okay, so if you look at this point, we currently have 1, 2 attackers on f2, 2 defenders. So a move that maybe we can consider is to play queen to f7. So now we have, it's not exactly Alekhine gun. Alekhine gun is when the queen is behind the two rooks, but we are creating a huge powerhouse on the pawn on f2. They should either move rook to f1 to defend or rook to b2 to defend. In that regard, I am considering to maybe play queen to h5. Not 100% sure. Okay, so the rook isn't doing anything, it's not attacking anything, and we can simply capture the pawn on f2 now. Okay, simply checkmate in 2 moves, check. The rook is blocking the bishop. And then rook f2, checkmate. Thank you, good game. Pawn b3. Bishop b2, attacking the pawn on e5. Pawn e3. First three moves have been achieved. So now remember, we want to remove the defender of the pawn on e5. They can play pawn d6 or bishop d6, sure. Looks good. Now, if we do capture here, even though it creates double pawns, this bishop is going to be open. So now we have to make a decision. Are we going to play, maybe we can play a move like knight f3. So right now we're threatening to capture on, okay, so pawn goes to e4, makes a lot of sense. In this position, either we can just move the knight back, or we'll play knight to d4. In this case, we'll play knight to d4, we'll capture. Bishop goes back to e2. So in this specific situation, I'm probably going to recommend to play pawn d3 to try to break open the center, and maybe go into one of the pyramid setups. In one of the classes, I did talk about how not always do we have a complete pyramid setup, because maybe you want to have an open bishop. So remember what I talked about, flexibility. Flexibility is so important in this opening that if you're in the mood for keeping your bishop open, you can do so. If you're in the mood for keeping your bishop closed but having more control over the center, totally up to you. Okay, so in this position I have to make a decision. Do we play d3 or do we play d4? You know what, let's play d4. It's just one of those moves. So in this situation, we could capture back with the pawn, but I like keeping my bishop open. Now, if we can get... this knight onto this square, it would be amazing. Okay, so I'm going to play pawn c3. This actually kind of works out. But if I play pawn c3, you know what I'm going to play? They want to get rid of the knight. If I play pawn a3, they're going to trade off the knight. Even though we're going to have the bishop pair. But can we take advantage of... You know what? Let's just play a3. I could play c3 and then b4. And then try to get the knight into that sweet spot. But we'll see what they're going to do. Maybe I'll be lucky and I can play b4 on the next turn. There you go. And knight b3. Getting the knight into that juicy spot. So the reason why I'm just saying juicy spot is because it's an outpost. So in this situation here, I understand what they're trying to do. They're hoping that we're going to castle. However, they place the queen and the rook on the same diagonal. Bishop goes here, and we're going to win the rook. So, since we have 2 extra points, it's always really important to trade queens, like I mentioned in a lot of my classes. So we're going to play queen to d4. We're going to try to trade queens. And in this position, as much as I want to play queen c5, they can stop the trade of queens. Kind of sad, but these things happen. I'm a little bit worried about castling. You know what? So let's not focus on that. We're going to play pawn to c4. So the idea with pawn to c4, if the bishop goes, oh gosh, I just missed the same pin. Gosh. Or skewer, sorry. It's okay. Masters make mistakes, and that's totally okay. That was so silly of me. I did place the queen and the rook on the same line. So our pawn, if we can defend the pawn properly, this pawn is very strong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to castle my king now. And now the rook can get into the game. So even though we don't have any extra points anymore because of my foolishness. Okay, so then I just moved here. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna move queen to d1. There's a double attack on the knight, and there's an attack on the pawn. So we're just gonna snatch this pawn. This is gonna help a little bit because, okay, so they wanna create a checkmate of some sort here, so you know what? I'm just thinking in this position because I could just capture this bishop and then there's no checkmate threat anymore. You know what? I'm just going to do that. I'm going to play queen to d4. I could do check. Queen to d4 is to attack this pawn. You have to be very careful about being greedy. But at the moment, this bishop is really protecting the king. So there's not going to be like knight g4 and queen h4 checkmates. Okay, so I'm thinking I could play queen b7, but you know what? I'm going to play queen c5 check. And then just move the pawns. Okay, so I'm going to play rook b1, threaten. Okay, so in this situation, it's what I can do is I can just simply move my pawn up. I'm going to capture here with check. Now these pawns are defended. So I kind of missed that. Okay. I'm gonna sacrifice the queen. I'm gonna play here. There's probably a much better way to win this, but I know I'm gonna be up material. Oh, I did not see this. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I'm still winning this. I know I lost by time, but if I just move my king out of the way, the queen is still in trouble. So if the rook captures, then I can capture here and win the queen. And if the king steps away and there's check, I can just capture. I mean, if it's still the same thing, if after I move my king to h2, if the queen captures on a7, there's check, win back the queen, and then we will have a bishop and a pawn extra, and it should be a winning game. I'm just not a very good speed chess player, but still hope you enjoyed the game. Actually, very interesting. Let's see what is... Let's look at the analysis. I'm not a huge fan of chesskid analysis, just a little bit too... it's not as in-depth as chess.com or Lichess, but it makes sense. It's for kids. Queen d6, this allows the opponent, yep, so as mentioned, I made a mistake later on. So in this situation, instead of playing pawn to c4, I should have dealt with the threat of bishop to e5. So in this situation, maybe I should have just like moved the queen back to d2 instead. And then still thought of playing c4, but on the next turn. Yeah, so as you can see here, it says plus 5.87, so that gives a pretty good advantage for white in this situation. So as long as I just played king to h2, I would have won. Pawn b3. First three moves, always the same. So when someone plays c5 and d5, what you want to do is you want to eliminate the defender of e5. So the whole entire opening, right, is to eliminate the defender. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to capture. I'm going to move my knight to e5. I'm going to threaten double pawns. They ignore it. And I'm just going to castle. Okay, they're going to play this move. I'm going to bring out... So this is the one kind of rare situation where we're going to play knight to c3. So they're going to push the pawn, and now I'm going to move And now we're going to start focusing on winning the pawn on c5. Let's see what black is going to do. So the reason why I played d3 first is just not give black any options of moving the pawn to c4. Okay, so the queen moves here. I'm going to move now the bishop to a3. I'm going to attack the pawn on c5. Knight protects. Makes a lot of sense. So if I can remove one of the defenders, I think I'm going to try pushing pawn to c3. This is an interesting move because I think they lose the pawn. So do you see how once I moved the rook to c1, in the future I want to put pressure on the c5 pawn. So let's capture. And even though there are 3 defenders on the pawn on c5, it's not the right defender. Or maybe I should capture with the bishop. You know what? I'll capture with the knight. In this case, I'm also capturing the pawn on d4, which really works out in our favor. So we have 2 extra points. If they play queen e6, I'm going to play queen f3, put pressure on the weak pawn. And then a good idea would be to double up, if possible. Now this bishop d6 move, I'm not 100% sure. I think I can just take this pawn because there's no check. My queen is defending the rook. I'm gonna protect the rook. And I have an idea of trading queens. Play queen to g4. Threaten. I think I'm still gonna play queen g4. Because there's the threat of checkmate. Okay, so king moves back. I want to capture. Let's play rook a6. I just want this pawn to be protected. Now we can take this pawn. Oh, defended though. I don't know what that move was. Thank you so much for the game. Hope you enjoyed the games today, and if you have any questions, do write in the comments. Have a wonderful day, and I hope any of the traps work out for you in the future. Bye now.